Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Say Again with me, Amrita Tripathi. I'm so happy to be bringing you a conversation today with Shreyasi Singh. She's a founding managing partner of Jetri, the founder and CEO of Harappa, which had a hugely successful exit being acquired by Upgrad. And Shreyasi, you're also the author of a book of nonfiction called The Wealth Walas. You've packed in a lot. My favorite identity of yours is, of course, once upon a time a journalist. I think that's always something that I bring up when we chat. But I'm so happy to be getting time with you as a founder, as an entrepreneur, and someone who's so thoughtful about how you can work for impact. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you and hello again. So saying hello again to you. It's such a pleasure to be chatting with you. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. I know it will be fun.
It will be fun, and we're going to have some sort of get behind the scenes, the world of Shreyasi, how she juggles, what she does. We're going to try and stay away from some of the boring stereotypical questions, unless we want to just point them out. So definitely don't want to be like woman founder, woman entrepreneur. I think that walking the talk is so much more important. But let me start by asking you about J3. This is something brand new. What does it mean to be the founding managing partner of J3, and what is it that you're doing?
So very, very excited about Jetri, which is obviously a business that we've announced a few weeks back. I think what's very exciting for me for J3, which essentially is what we're focused on, is working with educational institutions and visionary philanthropists to build, improve, and nurture higher education institutions as well as schools in the K-12 sector. And so obviously, one is very privileged if one works in education. It's one of those segments and sectors where you really feel like you're doing an honest day's of work, and there's a lot of impact to be seen. And in a country like India, of course, the more many of us work on education, the better it is, because so much needs to be changed, so much needs to be built, so much needs to be fixed, right? So of course that gratification and that sense of impact and fulfillment is certainly there at JQ because it works in education. Second, of course, it feels great because it's a continuation. I think I came into education, you mentioned journalism, I came into education about 10 years back, where I've done sort of, start with being an education administrator in a women's only management program, but then of course sort of found my own online company, and that had its own journey towards an acquisition. So, I could feel like this one, the decision that I'm taking with J3 is the most deliberate decision that I have taken to continue to work in education. I would say my first two stints in education, both with my first job as well as founding Harappa, were much more serendipitous. They happened to me and I took the opportunity, but I feel like with J3, I'm making my most deliberate commitment to continue in education actually for the foreseeable future, or whatever span of future that I can imagine at this point, which I think for me was a very, very big call. The third thing that I'd say I'm very excited about J3 is, we're working in a partnership. And J3 actually existed as an education consulting business in 9.9 education. So it's not a 0 to 1 journey. I'm already sort of inheriting a great track record of some very impactful work, as well as a great team who's very passionate about building higher education. So it's a new challenge. It's a new kind of leadership challenge where you're not doing the 0 to 1 sort of visionary entrepreneur role, which is what I played at Harappa, but much more, custodianship role, and much more, partnership, leading by collaboration and influence, which I think is actually the toughest form and model of leadership, right? So I think for those three things, the fact that we work in education, the second, the fact that I have personally made a very, very deliberate commitment to now work in education for the foreseeable future, and third, that it presents to me a very different leadership challenge, are sort of the three things that are keeping me most excited about J3.
I love that. And I love that you don't also like sit on your laurels. I'm trying to, as you were talking, I started to be like, when was the last time I saw Shreyasi being like, I'm going to chill now for a bit? It's not that.
I chill for, just to tell everyone, I chilled for 6 months broadly, but that chill was actually a churn. So I exited Upgrad in October of 2024, and I'm starting to work sort of full time on J3 as of April 1. So there was a 6 month sort of reset churn. I realized I'm not such a chiller. Like good at chilling. So there, your read is correct.
I think that's good for impact. You don't want to be chilling if you want to like work for impact. I respect the hustle, as they say. But I
Yes.
want to talk to you a little bit about. So you were just saying this is because this is not 0 to 1. So let me ask you a little bit about your 0 to 1 journey. I've been hearing all of these depressing stats about how 95% of startups fail. I've been looking at my own startup journey like with a sort of bilious eye this year. I'll be honest with you. But looking at you and Harappa, and I'm going to just take a few steps back for those of you joining us and talk a little bit about that transition. When you started off as an entrepreneur, I was looking at this interview we had done, which we link in the show notes, which I thought was fascinating. You said, you were the editor of the India edition of Inc. for 4 years. And actually, that was around the time of the startup boom. And I love this. You said it almost felt like doing a PhD in entrepreneurship because every month you're doing those 90 pages of a magazine all about startups. Was that actually that natural segue for you then? I mean, was that partly what led you down this road? And can you take us through a little bit about the Harappa journey as well?
No, absolutely. I keep saying that, like you, I value my journalism career so much, not for the money or, of course, for none of those things because it doesn't give you any of that. But really, what I have come to appreciate later as the kind of skills that career gives you, right? And it's engagement with the world, how curious it makes you, and of course, then some hard skills. But absolutely, I do not think I would have had the courage or even the imagination. I think courage comes almost imagination. First, you have to envision your own self to be able to do this and be excited about whatever you're supposed to do as an entrepreneur. If I was an editor of Inc. in India, and this is 2011 to 2015. So for everyone looking for shortcut ways of, doesn't happen. It was, in 2014, 15 that I started to even think about being an entrepreneur because of that stint of having been the editor of a magazine on entrepreneurship for 4 years. No way without that experience I would be here. And the Harappa journey, so we incorporated in March 2018. We launched it in May 2019. And in September 2024, after 2 rounds of funding and an acquisition by one of Asia's largest skilling and workforce development companies, and then working as part of that larger unit, I'm out. So I feel like it was like a whiplash. I think the Harappa journey for me was a whiplash. I think it was, it was so enriching and so much personal growth. I think I really am grateful for the fact that I'm one of those few entrepreneurs who, in a 6-year period, has seen the entire life cycle of a business, right? Which is to think about doing it, to working on it, to launching it, to raising money for it, to selling it, and to exiting it, even as it exists. So the lessons from there are so much, right? But really, what I'm left with, the thing I'm left with most is an incredible sense of privilege and gratitude for having been on that journey, which was tough as nails. It was a really, really hard journey. My son was going through teenage and high school through most of that journey, right? So I really felt like, it was some of the toughest years of my life. I think the couple of years at least of the 6-year journey at Harappa, because there was so much happening in my personal life and the professional life, also so much to prove. But really, it has given me a very different kind of confidence, for sure.
I do want to ask you a little bit about that because you were the CEO. It's not just about founding, it's about running the business. You have the P&L. You take it from 0 to 1, as you said, through being acquired and 2 rounds of fundraise. I am sure there are like 90,000 lessons you've learned, but can you share a few of, in terms of like, say, running a team, in terms of what changes, for your lens when it comes to success or failure now versus, say, it would have been, 10 years ago would have been a different conversation entirely. How do you look at success and failure as well?
So one is, of course, about how you capitalize the business, right? I think we started Harappa and then COVID happened and it just became this heydays for the internet economy and online businesses. And, we started as an online learning business and the kind of valuations that in the business of edtech and online learning, people have spoken about. I do think that, huge change from the metrics of success in a business that I valued then to what I learned, and really in some ways what I learned after the acquisition, right? About actually valuing sort of very different business metrics. It almost felt like one was living in two different universes over a 1-year period because, through the 6-year Harappa period, the edtech boom happened, the edtech slump happened, COVID happened, the startup boom happened, startup slump happened. So actually the measures of success, not just for me, but for everyone in the industry swerved really, really sharply. And I think they've become an enduring lesson for me now that, I value very different success metrics now. And I think I'm hopefully, and, I think 3 years later when we're speaking, I'm hoping to say that, I will feel like I've achieved that. I'm hoping I'm a better business owner now than I was. I think I was wanting to be a shiny, sparkly founder CEO at the beginning of Harappa, right? You want to be covered. Now I'm just like, listen, run a profitable business, stay under the radar, live your life, right? Very, very different. Sort of much more, I think, saner. But I really do hope I'm a better business person now. I think that is one thing that has fundamentally changed. And second thing that has fundamentally changed was I want to build an enduring business. I mean, Harappa was amazing, but it was so short, so quick. I feel like my journey with it wasn't complete. So much happened in 6 years. With J3, I feel I want to run it for a decade or two at least, right? Like I really now want to build it into what my imagination is or what I think. I feel like you can really get better at solving a problem when you're brewing in that problem for an extended period of time. I think lessons start to reveal themselves to you if you've been sitting on a problem for 2, 3, 4 years, right? Otherwise, your problem solving is very superficial and at a very surface level. And I felt like I was starting to do some of that at Harappa. But then, for a certain set of circumstances, one exited. But I feel like I really want to understand education, higher education, policy in higher education. All of that takes a lot of time, takes genuine time to be able to develop a nuanced expertise of a sector. I don't think I really did that to my satisfaction at Harappa. But I'm really sort of want to take a much more long view now. And there I was much more about hitting great milestones. So I'm really hoping I'm matured. I think I have.
Building on that, Shreyasi, because a lot of this feels like, it's learning by doing. You said a really interesting thing about lessons learned that you realize later. There's sometimes very similar problems you're puzzling over. And I think with entrepreneurship and running a business, it really feels like no amount of reading or listening to other people's stories can really substitute for that sort of hard practical experience. Would you agree?
No, absolutely. You're so right. And I think, we think that, and especially as journalists, we're so good at being able to get to some level of expertise, understanding of a new topic, because that's really been a training that you could go in and speak to anyone and be able to kind of make that into a concise story that anybody could understand. That's really one of the skills that we valued ourselves on, right? But I feel like you're absolutely right. There is almost no substitute sometimes for time spent on being passionate, committed, and mulling over the same set of problems. So for the quality of solutions to emerge from you, I think there is enough. I genuinely believe that there is a lot of value in outside in perspective as well. So I think somebody coming in fresh and new, that perspective too is important. And I feel like in a way, I always feel like the outsider to anywhere. That's kind of the way that I feel like my career has been. That I'm almost always doing something new. So I think that outsider perspective really gives you a fresh way, and I think is useful to everyone. But then there is also great value in being able to stay with the problem and really get to the bottom of it. And that's what I'm hoping to do this time, because I feel like I haven't done that. When I started with television journalism, left that, was in print, went to magazines, then wrote a book, then sort of, a physical educational program, then online. So, I've actually prided myself in a way on all of these, being able to make these pivots. And I think, I mean, there's a great sense of satisfaction in being able to have skills that allow you to do this. But now I do want to develop expertise and mastery, which I don't think happens when you move from one to another too quickly. So big change, I think, for me there.
That's so interesting. Also, because what you just said is that we sometimes do think there'll be shortcuts. You've said this a couple of times now, and I really want to pick up on that because for people who might be, listening or watching, and I definitely hope you'll find some takeaways in this conversation. I'm not going to ask you the boring. I'm very bored of these questions of like work-life balance or how do you manage, and that there's a space for all of that. It's very hard. It's not easy. But nothing in life is easy. So when you're running your own business, I'm sure doing a sort of job is also not. There are so many challenges with different things. But coming back to mastery, because I feel like this era we're in right now, it's oh, like, how can I be a thought leader? Oh, how can I create my personal brand? Oh, can I use ChatGPT to create my posts and make me sound like, there's so much emphasis on optics sometimes that I think people forget that the first thing you need to do is like develop that expertise, start, just keep going step after step after step. So for you now with education, and when we were chatting a little bit before this, you had said, of course, you've been focusing on, what you can do and have that gender lens and working for women's empowerment for the longest time. But you've gone sort of broader, but still deeper now into education. Can you take us through a little bit of that change and how you still hope to optimize for impact? Because you're absolutely right. In a country like ours, education is going to be the biggest game changer of all.
Yeah, no, so I will say that, and this reset that I took, these 6 months, I really did ask myself, because I have found myself at a place in my life that I needed to be, of course, very, very deliberate about what I want to do. And actually, the three things that I'm very passionate about is obviously education, anything to do with women, and for me, women's ambitions and women's agency, right? Like, I think that. And third, design and brand. I just love design and spaces, products, right? Like, I think just sort of, just an appreciation for beauty, which I think brings so much joy as well, right? So I really thought about how do I want to do that, and I did take also, and especially between women, and there was an idea that I had about working on something which was focused much more on just women than what I'm now doing at J3, which was the eventual decision that got made. And then I realized that I think you have to, Amrita, expand the pie of success. Like there is one way to say, and I've done that as well. And, and I'm sure I will come back to doing that. Is the idea that I've left behind to do this is an idea that I think is my lifelong sort of a calling. I've just chosen not to do it now because I realized, where can I have most impact? I said, as an ambitious woman herself, and for somebody who comes with the right intention to be able to do work that makes me successful, but also has a great impact on the world, I did feel that I could see obvious changes that one could make in education, which would also benefit women, rather than just working on women, right? And this was not an easy decision for me, but I realized that wherever I am, whatever I do, I bring with me a gender lens. You said that you don't have to introduce me as a woman founder, whatever, but I actually think that all of us still have to, because the fact is that there's just not enough of us in the kinds of journeys. It's not about designations or whatever, in the kind of journeys that we're on, right? Trying to do all of this. I still feel like, unfortunately, the task isn't cut out, that we don't become stories for somebody else to possibly follow. So I don't think I can ever remove gender, and I don't think any one of us can afford to, given how harsh the reality is for women and their lives.
I'm going to butt in there for a second to say, no, I completely hear you. I feel like, my approach has now moved a little bit to say, like, I want to bring more stories of women who are founders, women who are leaders, women who are entrepreneurs, not necessarily highlighting the designation. Some people have a problem with it. I'm glad you don't, though, actually. This whole thing, you can't be what you can't see. I think we need more such stories. Your story is certainly inspiring. But let me use that little segue to ask you, we're seeing in the US this huge backlash against DEI. We knew this was coming. We've seen the US government make all of these proclamations and companies, sort of jumping through hoops to follow through. What do you see in India as the sort of impact of that? It may not have caught on in sort of corporate circles here yet, but do you think that in the last few years, we've been hearing a lot of people saying the right words and not necessarily following through? Or do you think we've made some progress, like the glass is half full, et cetera, et cetera? What's your take?
Unfortunately, I don't think the glass is half full. right? And I feel like in India, I mean, the anti-DI, I think this is a US political context to that narrative. And of course, in for most of us, and the knowledge economy that we work in India is influenced by the conversation and whatever that happens in the US. But I don't see an anti-DNI because I don't think it took such strong roots in India as it did there, and maybe in some parts and some institutions swerved too much too quickly, and maybe in a very confrontational manner, that it created sort of this backlash, right? I don't think in India the movement itself was so strong. I think not about DNA. I just feel like the situation for women's careers, women's lives is improving at a much slower pace, even in our kind of rarefied social stratas where we think we can all afford to be post-feminism. It's not true. The data doesn't support that. The workforce data doesn't support that. So yes, in pockets things are improving. I think what's happening is there are many more role models, which is a good thing. So anecdotally, there are many more people that you see are doing good things. But I don't think, and I feel like in a way that's almost becomes our own bias to say things are getting better, and things are getting better for everyone. I think things are still not getting better for most people in any meaningful way. I think so much more needs to be done. So I'm much more on the glass half empty on this in India.
And 100% this rarefied atmosphere you're talking about. I mean, with Tap and Tribe, I met so many women who said, you don't realize that for us, fighting to have a career is still such a huge challenge at home, right? It's the lowest priority for everyone else. Most people want you to chuck it up. And, in the interest of those of you who are watching or listening, my lovely Say Again audience, in different cities, you're doing different things. We'd love to hear from you in terms of what are, issues you'd like to discuss and bring them to guests like Shreyasi.
On that part about what you said about some of your community members telling you that you might not appreciate how much of a problem it is for me to build a proper career. At Harappa we had done last year, I think we had about this time, we had done this research report on how women feel. One of the most depressing sort of data points from there was the fact that how many women professionals hide their successes in their family. So to say, neither do they discuss their worries, because I think one of the things that most gets at, in the most well-intentioned way, sometimes our family members and people closest to us say, listen, how does it matter? Why don't you just quit? I feel like in so many cases, suggesting women quit their workforce is such an easy, rolls off the tongue for so many people so easily, right? And that's why so many things happen, I feel, in excesses, because most people don't want to share in some ways to their families how tough it could be at the workplace for them in whatever situation, because that's not the advice that they want to give in, right? But similarly, I think 1 in 10 or 2 in 10 people said that they shared even their triumphs at work, right? With their families, because I feel like you almost can't shine too much. And I think, isn't it true? I think it's true. You almost also can't shine too much. I think I think it's a nice mediocre where your work and your career and your ambitions aren't really dinner conversation or an extended family meets. It's not the conversation, and I think all of us experience that. And I think some of us who have kind of bizarre career journeys which people can't understand, which even in my family people can't understand, which you have to speak a lot about your career for people to understand, but that would feel like, oh, she's just obsessed with her career, right? So then you almost just become this, you don't say anything. And I think I was just stunned to see how true it was for so many people, and how heartbreaking that you would not shout from the rooftops and not be celebrated even at home. So you're lonely in victory and lonely in your efforts.
That is very depressing. That is very depressing. But I'm going to plug Tap and Tribe. Yeah, this is why we thought we needed a community of women to celebrate each other. We were thinking, senior leadership, mid to senior leadership. And I learned more from that Harappa survey the year before, I think it was, which was talking about the glass cliff. So we'll link to these reports. I think they're really fascinating there. But, Shreyasi, I do want to ask you personally, as we talk about your own journey, because, we are very privileged. You're very successful as an entrepreneur. There are so many things that you have achieved that you can look at objectively. If you ever have imposter syndrome, that's the tactic, that's the strategy to use. You in the past had said, I remember these fascinating quotes you had shared last time. One is that you'd love for more women to articulate their ambition. So again, we might be speaking to a tiny percentage, but to let women know that there are champions like you out there. And the other one is to not be afraid of your ambition, right? And you had said something about how women actually just need an enabling environment to get on with things. I want to ask you, in your own journey, have you found that that's been helpful for you? Have you found mentors along the way? Have you yourself had to like sort of really dig down and fight for this? Because again, it's still a very unusual career path, as we're saying. I mean, we still number of unicorns in India led by women, the number of companies led by women that are not sort of legacy family businesses. You are actually in a very small percentage if we were to look at the numbers. So what's really helped you along your journey?
It's so amazing and strange that I feel like in some ways I've had my greatest self-esteem crisis in the last 6 months, even despite sort of all the magnanimous praise that you're giving
Really?
Harappa success and things like that. Because at a different different stages you expect different things from yourself, also, right? I was really in a lot of churn. I think that's a useful reminder that, externally, whatever might seem like success milestones, the fact is there's something happening in the external world, but really our world is our internal world. And that, whatever could sometimes look like a success to people outside, can still feel like a failure, loss, separation, all of that internally, which you still have to sort of, come out of. So I think we should get too carried away with what seems like success outside. I really feel now, in my 40s, that, well into my 40s, that now for me, really the marker for success, personal success is, do I have a like strong self-esteem and strong self-assuredness? Like, I have a much higher bar for me feeling happy and confident in myself than how people think of me. I think 6 years back it would be the opposite. And I think in a way that's what I did. Sort of I killed myself, but everybody else thought I was successful. I think when you sort of took the time, I was like, wow, how am I not feeling great, right? Because you do get emotionally burnt out, physically burnt out, mentally burnt out. None of those are, and I think it was still worth it. I would do it all over again, by the way, right? But I think there have to be moments when you pay the price for that and figure it out. And now I want to optimize for feeling good here, much more than how people think of me. 10 years earlier, I was doing just, even 5 years earlier, even 3 years earlier, I think I was doing just the opposite, right? So that has been a really useful lesson for me, which I didn't expect coming. Because when you exit a business after it's sold, your best friends will send you, oh, having fun in the south of France. It's really not that. And actually, it's very tough to start new journeys.
Yes.
To think about what the new 0 to 1, or whether it's a Jetri, or I'm kind of dabbling in one design-led passion project sort of a business also on the side. That's the second thing. But all of that is a lot. It's not easy to start again. I can glamorize pivots. I have felt it very difficult this time, even though I've done so many bizarre career pivots and new things. This time has felt in a way, and maybe this is, I don't know, growing older, I have no idea what it is. It has felt the toughest to restart.
I love that candor, because I feel like it's also because you're so much more authentic now. I think it is a life stage phase thing.
Yes.
And coming back to how we started, and you also have constantly challenged yourself, right?
Yes.
I mean, I think you're someone who's also not really comfortable just coasting, clearly, which is a good thing.
I'm like, it's
Thoda coast karna hai.
thoda ho gaya. Like, I'm constantly quoting that Geet character from Jab We Met, right? It's one of my favorite movies, bizarrely. And I don't know if you remember, have you watched it?
I don't remember. I cannot remember. I'm blank.
So, it's that Kareena Kapoor's character, Jab We Met, and she keeps missing a bunch of trains. That's how the movie begins. So that's how she and, the character played by Shahid Kapoor meet and whatever. And then, because she misses a bunch of trains in a period of 3-4 hours, and she goes and she tells someone, God ji, meri life a boring bana do. I've had those moments in the last 5-6 years. It'd be nice to be a bit more sort of, settled and not have this urge, or how the situations emerge that you have to make so many changes. So that also happened.
So if you had to give your younger self any advice, because you also did say that you do it all over again. If you had to give, your younger self, any younger listeners or viewers, because, there's so much pressure on young people. And as a parent, I'm sure you're feeling it,
Yeah.
for your kids as well. I mean, there's so much pressure to figure things out at like university level, or your first job is going to determine the rest of your life. What would your advice be, especially because you've done the mid sort of career jumps?
I think that life is long. Many of us, I keep saying this actually, many of us are going to live till 90 with the way medical technology is progressing and all of that. And then you have to think about the fact that you have a 60, 65-year-old career, because if you live till 90, many of us will choose to, or many of us will have to, because of monetary concerns, work well into our 70s and maybe 80s. I really feel like it's both very scary, because you're like, oh my God, I have to keep doing this. But I think it's also very liberating to say that you can. And my own career has taught me that, you can have these highs and lows, right? Because it is a 60-year career. It's not a job, it's not 5 jobs. You'll have 4 careers, you'll have 4 different professions, right? And that is going to be the reality for most of us. So many of us have engineered change and chaos on our careers, but most of us will have change and chaos be thrust upon us, given that if you are going to be in a productive workforce for 60 years, and the way things are changing, a lot of change is coming your way. So nobody can afford to sit on their laurels. I think everybody has to constantly find ways to, do more, do different, reinvent, whatever it is. I think it's going to be constant quest.
Yeah.
For many of us.
Stay sharp, stay on top of things, be ready, be flexible. Okay, while I'm having a slow heart attack listening to that 90 slow heart attack happening here, guys. Let me ask you 2 final questions though. One is, what is something that really stresses you out? We're looking at this sort of age of ascendant AI. Everyone's talking about, singularity is nearer. It's going to throw everything into chaos. We'll end on a positive note, folks, I promise you. But one thing that's keeping you up at night.
Living in India, I just feel like the quality of our lives in our urban centers. I just feel like, if I'm working so hard and I was constantly reinventing myself, finding things to do, trying to do impactful work, just for what? I just feel like an urban renewal, urban renovation. It's like, if there's one thing that I just feel really needs to improve is the quality of our urban life and our urban infrastructure. I think that has so much sociological impact. There's some mobility, fitness, access to interesting experiences. So actually, that really upsets me. I think just the quality of lives that we lead with our urban infra.
Breathable air, or the luxuries of life. I agree. I agree.
For every strata of society, it presents. We essentially privatize our way out of it. We have humidifiers to purifiers to water, whatever. You go. Yes, but I just feel it's not okay that so many people are living in such suboptimal conditions for any sense of happiness or human potential to shine.
That is that is so true. Final question for now, just keeping an eye on the time, is to ask you one thing you're grateful for that you'd like to share.
One thing I'm grateful for?
Yeah.
I'm really grateful for my own sense of personal resilience. I value I really have learned to value my personal resilience, for sure. And I'm very grateful for being gifted default optimism. I think there is some of that is a nature thing as well, I think. So I'm really grateful for my resilience and optimism.
I love that. I think that's a first on Say Again. I love that. Thank you so much, Shreyasi, for your candor, for being so honest and authentic and not giving me the easy answers. I appreciate you. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much, Amrita, as always. Thank you so much.